Hi, I'm Ken Kessler, and welcome to the Sounds of Christmas podcast. If you're new to this podcast, I want to start by saying thanks for joining us. If you're not new, welcome back. Either way, I'm very glad you're here. Now, to avoid any confusion, I want to say that there won't be any music played here. This is a place for conversation. I'll talk about Christmas music and some related topics, sometimes by myself and sometimes with guests. If you're looking for music, just go to soundsofchristmas.com and click on the tree or the player on the front page or on the Listen Now page. We play the best variety of Christmas music all year long. Well, except in October, when we play the best variety of Halloween music. And that's what's going on right now, as I'm recording this in October. I probably should also mention that this podcast also dips into Halloween fare at this time of year, too. Case in point, today's episode, I welcome members of the band The Stevens, Chayce, Josh, John, and Seth, whose debut album, released earlier this year, is compiled solely of songs inspired by the stories of Stephen King. As we get into this, I want you guys to know up front that this is probably the least prepared I've ever been for an interview, because I don't know very much about you beyond what's on the Bandcamp page. So forgive me if I ask anything stupid.
I think that's okay, because at least for me, I'm pretty ill prepared myself. So.
All right, so we're evenly matched. Good.
That's right.
All right. Are you guys in other bands, or was the Stevens the first thing that you guys have done?
Yes and no. The Stevens is the first thing that the four of us as a group have done together. However, John and I were in a band together back in our college days, which was 15, 20 years ago. And Josh, you can speak to, Josh has been in some projects.
But not with you guys.
Right.
Yeah, not with us.
Yeah, you had been in stuff out in California.
In fact, we didn't even know each other. And Seth and I met off a Facebook post. Is that what it was? Yeah.
Yeah, I was wondering how you guys found each other, got together.
I moved to Nashville about a month before COVID. So my musical plans were sort of dashed on the rocks of viral disease. And after, I don't know, probably a little over a year, I kind of had said enough is enough. And I put out made an ad on Facebook and said I was looking for a punk rock band. I knew that there was some punk around in town, but I was eager to just get going in a project, and Seth answered, and we kind of had a great little chat on a slightly buzzed Sunday afternoon, and just kind of went from there.
Yeah. And as the album that you guys put out this year, that's also called The Stevens, was this the first release that you guys have done together?
Yeah.
So how did you come up with the idea that you were going to record songs based on the works of Stephen King?
I actually started getting into Stephen King because of John back when we were in college. He was reading It and The Dark Tower. And I remember him showing me The Gunslinger, and it just, the verbiage in the book was unique. It was, terms like caw, and that's the one I can think of, but like, that's kind of a major theme in the Dark Tower books. And so I got turned on to it, started reading those and read through all of them. This huge series. It's like 7 or 8 books. I think it's 8 books now. And then a lot of his books touch on that series, but I was reading through it, I think the second time through. And as I was reading, just for kicks, I was writing songs based on scenes or characters in those books. And I thought that would be fun to have like an album for each book. And I was just coming up with it in my head. I didn't write any of it down. I didn't, record anything. It was just a way to occupy my mind as I was reading, and in all different genres. But then, we got together. Chayce and I met at where I work. He was a customer there, and we just started talking. I could tell he probably liked music off the regular beaten path. And so we started talking about music, and I said, "Do you like punk rock?" He says, "Yes, I like punk rock." And so that was like, all right. So we had a good long conversation and ended up exchanging information. We tried out for a band that was, like Josh mentioned, when the world kind of shut down, we tried out for a band right before all of that happened. So nothing ever came of that. And then, then we got together with another guy to just play some covers of some Screeching Weasel and the Queers and things like that. And that's kind of in conjunction with when Josh and I made a connection. So I was like, sweet, we got a drummer, and it was just an excuse to get together, drink beer and have fun, do something other than just, watching a movie or whatever. eventually I was like, well, maybe we could do some original stuff. And I don't know exactly what happened, but I think it was that same kind of concept when I was reading through the Dark Tower book the first time. It'd just be like a shtick band, essentially, have our theme. It's something to grab people's attention because everybody knows Stephen King for the most part. They at least know Pennywise, Shawshank Redemption and Stand By Me and Green Mile. Those are movies, that a lot of people have seen or know, and they're not even scary movies, but they're still in the canon of Stephen King. And so people know him. And I've seen the success of certain bands like the Jasons, for instance. They all dress like Jason Voorhees. They wear the mask and, they sing about Camp Crystal Lake. And so it was kind of in that vein of what we were shooting for. And yeah, we wrote I Want to Take Carrie Back to the Prom. I think that was the first song we wrote, guys.
I think so.
And then and it just went from there. We just started cranking some out and eventually got to booking some shows, and we're just having fun with it. So
yeah. And when Seth and I first met that day, we were talking about an idea he had for a themed punk rock band called The Dads, where it was all about, being a father and the crazy stuff and silly things that happen, and just kind of thinking of some funny ways that we could connect with, other parents and everything. And then he just kind of texted me out of the blue. He's like, I kind of squashed The Dads. I want to do a Stephen King themed band, and started sending me song ideas and snippets and everything. And it just kind of took on a life of its own and grew from that little seed. So
for anybody listening who's hearing this and thinks this is like a Halloween stunt, you guys released this last spring. This was not like a Halloween gag. Are there plans for more? I know it's hard to ask that when you've just released this, but Stephen King certainly has a wealth of material for you.
Oh yeah. But last time I counted, he's written, I don't know, over 70 in the 75 range of either novels or collections. That doesn't include screenplays. That doesn't include, essays and interviews. He has been very prolific, and absolutely. I think that was one of the appeals for me, was that we could keep this going as long as we want, and
Really?
even
Yeah.
circle back around and write songs about movies or books that we've already written about, from a different angle. I mean, you could do an album based on just one book alone, so there's really I don't think, one lifetime, is enough to cover everything, so it's actually nice because I don't have to think about what I'm going to write about today. Well, I can just, think about Stephen King stories. It gives me a head start on, subject matter to write about. So, and there are some things that we discuss and throw around, and we decide, nope, probably shouldn't write about that. But although it's tempting, it makes us laugh, but
that's important.
It does take the pressure off material wise, and songwriting wise. It's not like Seth said, you're not just sort of digging at anything too deep, right? Because there's a lot of tongue in cheek that we're doing, but it's just like we can just throw around movie ideas or story ideas or certain sub themes within a story, and just build something off of that, and then take a few snippets of some of Stephen King's classic one-liners and things like that, and just kind of roll with it. So yeah, I agree. I mean, it's something, there's just fodder there, there's material there to draw off of.
Every novel has iconic lines, certainly for fans. I'm your number one fan, which could be I don't need to, I'm not trying to feed you guys song ideas. You don't need that. But there's so many, it seems like what you've done so far are a lot of the early books. You mentioned the song about Carrie. You have the song from Salem's Lot, Don't Invite Barlow to the Party.
Yes.
The Shining, All Shook at the Overlook. The Stand, The Captain Trips Hop. And The Stand, I mean, it's over 1,000 pages. You could probably have 2-3 albums worth of stuff from that.
Yeah,
that's right.
Trash Can Man certainly needs his own song.
Absolutely.
I know all the songs. I know where they came from, except one. And I'm guessing this is from a short story.
Yeah.
It's the second track, "A Boner Saved My Life."
Yeah.
You're the second person in a week, I think, to ask us where that one
Yeah.
came from.
Yeah.
So where'd
Yes,
that one come from?
That is from a short story called Autopsy Room 4. I believe it is from Everything's Eventual, the collection. If it's not from there, it's from Nightmares and Dreamscapes, but I'm pretty sure it's Everything's Eventual. And it is about, long story short, or short story shorter, a guy that wakes up on an autopsy table, but he cannot move. He can't move any muscles. He can't blink. He's breathing so lightly that it's virtually undetectable, but he is aware and he can't open his eyes. All he can hear is the talking around him. And he is, realizing to his horror that he's about to be cut open. They got the pericardial shears out and they're about to cut his chest open because they think he's dead. He's been brought in. And so, Boner Saved My Life. You can imagine why they didn't cut him open. The one muscle that came to life the quickest was, his member there. So anyway, that's always been one of my favorite stories because it is so horrifying, but it makes me laugh. Like I remember it's like the very last page, you figure out what it is that saves him, and it's hilarious. It's just, what do they say? Laughing, laughing at the end of the world or whatever, just laughing in the face of darkness or whatever. I like that. I like the juxtaposition of those two like feelings, the horror and then the campiness or the funny out, and it really works well in a short story sort of situation too, I think.
I was about to say the joke almost writes itself. It's a song called "Boner Saved My Life" and it's a short story. The jokes almost write themselves on stage if we want to.
Yeah, that was the other thing I wanted to ask that you brought up on stage. When you guys do shows, this album only has 8 songs and they're all kind of short. I'm guessing that you have other material that you perform.
We just slow them down. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. It turns into a sludge metal performance, 65 beats per minute.
We do have a couple covers. We do. You saw it's not on the Bandcamp, but if we did get the mechanical license to do it for like Spotify and other things, but we did Pet Cemetery by the Ramones. So we do that one. And then we do a couple other covers live. And then we do have new material. There's one song we've been playing live that we just wrote. It's called Sweet Beverly. So and it's just kind of a love song. It's more of a moderate tempo song, very major key, a lot of harmonies on the chorus. So that one's been, and Chayce had a brilliant idea. Chayce, tell them what you did with the tag at the very end of the song.
Yeah, so we were kind of looking at ways of filling in kind of the back end of the song where we just kind of repeat a line. And I was driving to work. I have an almost hour-long commute, so I just listened to a ton of music, and I was listening to the Ramones, and I Want to Be Your Boyfriend kind of came up as a line, and I was like, man, that works really, really well with the rest of the material, the kind of, hope and idea that, the character might end up with Beverly and kind of our, perspective of the song. And I was like, that would work really well. So I brought it up, and we kind of threw that in at the end as kind of a tag of "I Want to Be Your Boyfriend," and also calling back to our mutual influence of the Ramones as well. So
yeah, and the the songs from the perspective of Ben in the story. So we like when Chayce showed me that, I'm like, that's perfect. That because it's like, I want to be your boyfriend, and it's like it just fits with the chord progression, and just in the tag, just throwing it in there seemed to fit really well. And
So basically, there's no limit to who will rip off.
that's right.
Yeah, exactly.
The sincerest form of flattery.
That's right.
So I know the Ramones are a big influence. Anybody else that all you guys are inspired by, aside from Stephen King?
I think we all have some similarities in what we listen to, but I think most of us are pretty pretty varied on what we listen to. At least for myself, I'm kind of the metalhead of the group, and draw a lot of inspiration from heavy metal and even like blues and different forms of alternative music and things like that. I've kind of been through every musical phase you could ever have, I think, but tend to stick more along the lines of metal. Like Pissed Off Pyro Girl was the music was written by me, that kind of more hardcore punk aesthetic, a little more metal kind of thrashy into it and everything. So, but at least for me, like Metallica is a huge influence, Iron Maiden, and into punk rock. I'm the youngest guy in the band, so my foray into punk rock was a lot of bands like Lagwagon, Green Day, Bad Religion. So kind of the more melodic skate punk era of punk rock is what I try to draw a lot of for the leads and solos that I write for our music.
John, how about you?
Oh man, yeah, it's been all over the place for me throughout my life, but the one commonality has always been punk rock, from the time I was about 12, 13, 14 up until now. Yeah, and one of the funny stories or coincidences with all this too is I've always listened to punk rock, but not exclusively. And it'd been a while since I've been to a show, and Seth came up to visit a few years back. This was before even any of this we'd even thought about doing any of this stuff. And I was the one who introduced him to Stephen King books when we were in college. And then he came up, and I saw that the Queers were in town, and I was like, "Hey, let's go! Come on, we haven't been to a punk rock show in forever. Let's go!" And we had such a great time. It was such a great scene and a great vibe. And ever since then, that sparked this like rebirth of punk rock in Seth that has rubbed off on me. So the last couple of years, yeah, it's like pretty much all I've been listening to. Going back to Ramon stuff and Queers, and also
Screeching Weasel,
newer bands. What's that?
Screeching Weasel.
Yeah.
Josh, how about you?
I guess my story is pretty similar. I mean, I was kind of a Hessian metalhead as a young teenager. That quickly slid into punk rock. I ended up in doing a lot of punk for the last few years, probably what we would call hardcore, skate punk, thrash type stuff, maybe a little bit of metal crop. I listen to a lot of world music. I always felt like my calling was in pop. So I really, I get inspiration from all forms of music. I'll listen to classical, I'll listen to jazz, space jazz, and then experimental music and noise and stuff like that, and electronic stuff too. I really just try and get into as much different stuff as I can. I've been listening to a lot of Fela Kuti lately, going back to that Afro pop stuff, a lot of Turbo Negro, and things like that. So I try to keep it open. Here in Nashville, I've had to open up my country music appreciation, which is pretty light. So I've been studying a lot of Elvis and a lot of classic country music too. So, I try and keep the influences coming from all different places. That being said, I used to think as a drummer, I really needed to be, able to slide into almost any form. And after doing punk for so long, I really have enjoyed that and bringing my other influences into that, So I think that there's a lot still that punk rock has to offer. Some friends of mine back in California are introducing a lot of Spanish stuff into their punk, a lot of, mariachi things, like all kinds of flavors can be integrated. So, I like that. But punk's my thing. I love the energy. I love the performance. I love the feedback. I love that kids are getting involved. It's been great.
I was talking to Mike from Vista Blue about a week ago, and he mentioned you guys, and I hadn't heard of the Stevens, and I went to your Bandcamp page, and my first thought was, okay, is this a gag? Is it, it's 8 songs about Stephen King books, and the second one has boner right in the title. Is this for real? And then I listened to them, and I'm like, all right, if this is a gag, these guys are good at doing that, but it's not a gag. It's obvious in talking to you that you guys care about the music and also about the material, the Stephen King stuff. You're all very knowledgeable about both. So do you get feedback like that where people treat what you're doing as a gag?
I think it kind of depends, honestly. Like the people that are knowledgeable about Stephen King and really like and appreciate his works are usually the ones having 30 minutes, an hour long conversations with us after the show about, I love that you mentioned this. Are you guys going to write a song about this? And when is this coming? And a lot of the people that are just kind of maybe enjoy the music, maybe don't really know much Stephen King, or the ones that are like, oh, that song was so funny, or that was really cool that you guys can sing that with a straight face, or, like just kind of more entertained by the comedy aspect and just the overall musical aspect of it rather than the subject matter.
Having been a Stephen King fan for just 40 plus years, and I have all his books over here. I can't quite turn the camera there, but they're all hardcover first editions, and they're in chronological order because I'm a Virgo and it has to be that way. But I looked at my song at the songs on your album, The Stevens, and I thought, okay, well, they skipped over the Dead Zone, so I got to ask about that. And then I'm looking at all these other songs. I'm like, all right, well, there's Pet Sematary, but of course the Ramones did that, so I don't know what they would do about that. And there's Christine, and on and on and on. And I'm sure that you get a lot of that from people who you talk to, and they hear about what you do, and they see, okay, well, you've got these songs. When are you doing the song about Annie Wilkes? When are you doing the Dark Tower album? When are you? And
Right.
That's got to get, on the one hand, that's nice that people care enough, and on the other hand, it's kind of old. Hey, I'm going to do what I want to do in the way that I want to do it, and stop bothering me.
Well, that's funny. You hit on 2 that are already in the works.
Yeah.
You just mentioned Annie and Christine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those are our 2 closest to being ready to put out their songs, other than the Beverly song. It's funny, they're all girl name songs: Beverly, Annie, Christine.
Yeah.
But, so anyway, I honestly, I don't know about the other guys, but when people come to me and ask, when are you going to write about this? When are you going to write about this? Or have you thought about this? I personally love it. Like, cause I nerd out about Stephen King and I nerd out about punk rock. I've conflated 2 things that I just love. And so when people want to talk about it, great. Yeah. And I actually, at times I'll be like, well, if you have an idea, let me know, because, sometimes the well is a little dry. And so anyway, that's, like I said, I love it. I love having the conversations. One of my favorite things is after the show, I remember our very first show, a guy named Texas said, you should write about Cycle of the Werewolf. And that was one I hadn't read at the time. So I was like, I'm going to go read that. I had a copy, and then I went and read it. And absolutely. The Silver Bullet, there's all sorts of things in there that you could write about. I think I came up with an idea. The Reverend is aware, it's slipping my mind now, but I started working on some ideas. But yeah, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I love it. And it really is a way to connect with people. Josh, you're the one who said it early and often, you tell people you're in a punk rock band. Oh, okay. Yeah. It's kind of Ramones core, old school pop punk. Oh, all right. And it's all based on Stephen King. And that's when people perk up. They're like, what? Are you serious? Because it's to be frank, it's kind of a cheat to stand out a little bit, but we really do enjoy it. As silly as it might seem, as pranky as it might seem, we're just having fun, and we all really get along with each other, which I love too. If we hated each other, I would have quit a while ago, you know.
Yeah.
But we enjoy each other's company. It's cool to hang, and then, you know, be able to put it out there. And we're meeting a lot of cool people doing it too,
sure.
you know. So
Yeah, there's such an amazing wealth of material, and I've been a fan of King's for so long, and you know, I still, the day a book comes out, if I haven't ordered it from Amazon so it shows up, I'm at the store on that Tuesday to make sure that I can get it. Whether or not I have time to read it, I've got probably 7 or 8 that I haven't been able to read yet. But
Right.
you know, being an adult and having to work sucks sometimes. But
Yes.
you know,
We understand.
yeah.
Yeah.
But
That's why
there's
we haven't
so
read
much-
that Dark Tower album yet.
Yeah. Exactly.
but there's so much, and that made me think: has anybody else done this kind of thing? Because I can't think of other bands that have, for want of a better word, latched on to a particular author's work and made that into their work. I know you had mentioned the band that does all the Jason Voorhees songs, but that's really not the same. I know there's a Christmas band called the Home Alones that has done
yes.
songs that are just about Home Alone.
I will say there is a lot of bands and artists that do the Harry Potter theme. That's
the Harry
big
Potter
thing.
movement for sure. Right.
And you've got the Oakley Dokleys, the Ned Flanders band.
Yeah.
But you know, I think really within punk rock, and you kind of see it a lot in metal too, that there are a lot of bands and songwriters that do tend to latch on to the more intense side of writing. I mean, of course, you know, Metallica and Cliff Burton, you know, wrote several songs pertaining to H.P. Lovecraft and the Call of Cthulhu. You've got a awesome band out of Michigan called the Zoonoids that they kind of touch on a little this and that, but they've got at least 3 or 4 songs on their 10-song album that talks about H.P. Lovecraft stuff. So, you know, there definitely are bands that touch on it, or, you know, find people that inspire them. But as far as being kind of their identity, I think that's a really cool thing about this band and this project.
There is one band. We're actually not the first Stephen King band. And I don't know that they're doing anything anymore. But there was a band called the Lobstrosities, and they were a Dark Tower band. They were out of California, either Stockton or Sacramento, I can't remember, but they were like more of a hardcore metal band. But like when I saw that, I perked it. That was before we even got together. I saw them on some social media post, and I was like, that's awesome. That is so cool. So they maybe, you know, subconsciously knowing that they did it, you know, when we started doing our thing, I was like, maybe that played into, you know, whenever I texted Chayce, like, we should do Stephen King, you know, sort of deal. But anyway, the other thing about, I want to go back to something John said earlier about when I came up to visit him. It was the first time in a long time we had seen each other, because we had kind of fallen out of touch. And I actually came up initially just so we could watch the first It, you know, the remakes that had come out recently. That was in theaters at that point, and that was the main reason I came up to see him. And then we went to the queer show that same weekend, and it was almost like
Chocolate and peanut butter.
Yeah, chocolate and peanut butter, or like you know, like foreshadowing of things.
Yeah, it's a little prophetic, right?
Yeah,
for sure.
What was to come? Yeah.
You mentioned that you do a couple other songs when you're performing live, Pet Cemetery. Do you see branching into other things, or are you going to try and keep it as Stephen King?
At this point, yes, just as Stephen King. John lives in Cincinnati. The other 3 of us live here in Middle Tennessee. So getting together to rehearse is a little bit of a challenge. So we do it once or twice a month. And then, you know, when we play a show, we'll try to have a practice that same weekend or whenever we play, you know, kind of a tune-up. We have ideas. I'm just going to throw it out there. I just picked up a really pristine hardback version of the Bachman books, the first 4 Bachman books. We had an idea to do a side band called Richard Bachman Turner Overkill. and it would be all like, you know, a departure from our normal sound where it's like more hardcore and more like intense, because the Bachman books can tend to be a little more intense, you know. So anyway, like just a one-off, do a song for each of the stories. I think there's 7 Bachman stories. So, you know, just do like a short little EP or something, and, you know, make every song like 60 seconds or so, sort of deal, you know. But those, you know, we talk about that stuff, and it's fun to, you know, conceptualize. Maybe one day, once we can lure John to move down here.
Well, and then you got to do a Bachman and Stevens duet for the Regulators in Desperation.
Correct. Yeah. Like do a EP where the first the 2 tracks on one side are Desperation, 2 tracks. I actually thought about that, you know, that's actually not a bad idea.
Yeah. And you mentioned Dark Tower, the album. We had actually, or Seth had the idea of pretty much an album per book.
Mm-hmm.
It's definitely something that was honestly in the conversation. I think as soon as we kind of got solidified, was like, what more could we do with this if we wanted to, or if we got bored, or whatever the case, or just to expand, you know, our reach a little bit more. So never sitting still in our minds,
right.
Always trying to go to the next thing, and but, you know, still focus on and love what we're doing, you know, with the Stevens, because we all have such a good time, and all do, you know, our writing on, you know, to our own extent, and just have a lot of fun doing it.
Yeah.
Have any of you had a chance to meet Stephen King, or do you have any idea if he's aware of you?
No, I haven't. I don't know about the other guys. I don't think any of us have met him. Have you guys?
No.
Yeah. And I don't think he's aware of us. I you know, it's like, in a way, you kind of you want him to know, but like Josh said, we also don't want to get a cease and desist letter. So.
Right.
We hope we're doing right by him, because
yes.
we know he can be pretty critical of the films that get adapted, right? So we even talk about, you know, our focus, is it on the film or is it on the written story, you know? And I think we tend to try to default towards the written story more.
And the exception to that is The Overlook. I went all in on Kubrick on that song, but I do want to follow up and have another Shining song based solely on the book, because they're so different. I love them both. I know King freaking hates that movie and doesn't understand why anybody likes it. And that's fine, you know, like we're not, you know, but like Josh said, we do try to kind of more often than not stick with the written story versus the movie.
Yeah.
So,
and with the idea of Annie Wilkes, you know, the A Misery song, which is definitely coming and hopefully ready to be played live fairly soon. I actually had just got done reading Misery for the first time. I would say I'm the least experienced in the group as far as King's material. Misery was one of my first few forays into his writing, and I just got so inspired by it. I sat down and wrote lyrics to it that were based on the book. And of course, I'm not going to give any spoilers, but there are differences as far as what happens to the main character between the book and the movie, and it definitely leans more in with the book. So people that have never read the book may be like, what? I didn't think that's what happened, because I've always, you know, the sledgehammer, right, is always a super iconic scene, and that's what you think happens if you haven't read the book, and it differs a little bit, and that's what I leaned into for that song.
Well, it's like The Shining. Everybody pictures Jack Nicholson with an axe,
right?
And there wasn't an axe in the book.
There's a rope knot.
Yeah. And Dick Halloran had a much happier ending in the book than in the movie. And a lot of people don't get that. I really liked the miniseries that ABC did in the 90s when they revisited that, and it was much closer to the book. And you got the hedge animals in there. And
that was actually Stephen King's response to the Kubrick movie.
Yeah.
It's Stephen King's The Shining is the actual title, you know, because he, you know, that's how much he hated it. And they are so different. And Just I think his biggest beef, in spite of all the different changes that were made, but his biggest beef was that Jack came across as just a creepy guy from the outset in the Kubrick movie.
Yeah.
Whereas in the book, it's a progression. He's a loving father and husband who has that monkey of alcoholism on his back that caused him to make a really bad mistake with his kid. So he's having to figure out his career and his occupation and rebuild everything. And it's not him that's the villain, it's the motel, that's
right.
The villain, hotel rather. And so, yeah, that's why I personally want to revisit that and write a song for the book, because they're kind of two different stories, especially the way they end and the way that, Jack is the main character kind of develops or doesn't necessarily in the Kubrick film. So
that was the first Stephen King book I read. And then I saw the movie. And I mean, I was a teenager and I wasn't expecting so many things to be different. In the book, Jack is sort of redeemed at the end, saves his family,
right,
and sacrifices himself. And in the movie, he's just a lunatic with an axe who gets lost in the maze and freezes to death. I probably should have said spoiler for anybody who hasn't read or seen that yet. But there were little things in the movie that they changed too that bugged me, like the room number.
Yeah.
That one room. Why change that? It just seemed an arbitrary kind of thing.
That's Kubrick. That's his obsessive nature.
Yeah.
And who knows why, but I know Kubrick studied a lot about, we shouldn't be talking about him. We should be talking about Stephen King. But anyway, real quick, he studied a lot about the subliminal messaging in advertising when he was making that movie. And so I think a lot of those little changes that are problematic when you're, a huge fan of the book, I don't think Kubrick ever did anything that wasn't intentional and had a reason in his own mind, whether it was legitimate or not. But yeah, I don't know. I personally saw the movie before I ever read the book. So I loved the movie. I didn't know what was coming. I didn't know what to expect. And then I read the book and yeah, I'm like, oh man, that's so much different. And so I think having consumed them in that order really helped me love them both, kind of, they're both my kids, but I love them equally. They're different, but sort of thing. So
what was, and I don't know if this even matters, but what was the first Stephen King book that you read that sort of hooked you? And this is for everybody.
Go, John.
I was thinking about it. The first one I ever read was Cujo, and I was trying to remember how old I was. I was young when I started reading that stuff. Not older than 5th grade. And I think, and I had a bunch of first edition hardcover stuff too. It all disappeared over the years, or almost all of it. I've still got a decent collection. But I think the last one I read was The Last of the Dark Tower. It's been a minute since I've really sat down and read anything by him.
Yeah, I had a buddy in college that he's the one who introduced me. And I think the first one I ever read was either It or Gunslinger. I forget which one that was, but I think it was It first.
I think so, yeah.
And I jumped right into The Dark Tower. And I think I read some of the short stories books in between there too. And then I just read The Talisman. I had never read The Talisman. I just read that last year, or about 3-4 months ago.
That's another song coming up too, by the way.
Yeah. And that's a co-author too. So I think Seth will write one and I'm going to try to write one too.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah. And for me, I got my introduction to Stephen King more through films. Actually, I think the very first, I may have read like a couple of short stories when I was in high school, but I think the actual first full Stephen King novel I read was Misery, which was just late last year, early this year. And I've started on Pet Cemetery. I've built up my collection of Stephen King books over the past 6 months to a year to just kind of, try to catch me up to where these guys are. I have a general knowledge and glean a lot from them of the material, but I kind of fell in love with the movies. I think the first movie I ever watched was The Green Mile. Yeah, The Green Mile is what really kind of drew me in. And then I watched like The Shining, and recently I've gotten into Christine and just the different, movies of it all. Although we do tend to stick more towards books, I have more experience in the movies.
Have the other guys given you a lot of homework?
I've given him a bunch of books
Yeah,
because I've been gradually replacing my paperbacks with, if they can be first edition hardcovers, but definitely the full size, hardcover edition of all of his books. But yeah, my first one was Gunslinger, and that's because of John. And then I got through the.
I don't know if that's the wise thing to do or not, but jumping right into the Dark Tower series, it'll hook you.
Yeah, it amazes me when people say they don't like it. I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, it covers everything almost, like so many genres, and yeah, it's an incredible epic, that whole story.
Well, it's really interesting reading so many of these as they came out, because in the late 80s, I'm not sure which book it was, but there was a novel, one of the novels came out, and in the front it lists all the books by Stephen King.
Yep. And
it listed The Dark Tower, The Gunslinger, and that hadn't been mass released yet. That was just a private thing. So everybody, all these Stephen King fans, are like, what is this? We've got to get this.
Weren't those originally released, like it's 6 chapters, I think, or something like that? And I think they were originally released one at a time in
a
magazine.
Yeah.
In a magazine.
Could be. Yeah. I just remember seeing that and like, wait a minute, what is this one? I've never even heard of this one. And I've got to find it. And I know so many people who were like that. And then the books started to finally come out. That was.
Were you a big fan of Gunslinger back then, reading it when it was brand new?
Yeah.
When it was just the one book? Because I found it to be a little slow at first, and I made myself get through it because my buddy was just like, no, keep going, you're going to love it.
Yeah.
And then as soon as, was it Drawing of the Threes, the next book?
Yeah.
I think
Boom.
20 pages into that book, I couldn't put it down,
Well, when they finally released The Gunslinger, mass market or whatever it was, there was already plans for The Drawing of the Three was coming out 3-6 months later, something like that. You already knew that. So you got that.
Oh, you didn't have to wait very long. Huh?
And then it was staggered and slow until the last 3 books. Boom,
it
boom,
really
came
stretched out in the middle. I remember waiting a long time for the sequels.
Yeah, and he got in that accident in the late 90s.
Yes.
And I thought, we're never going to get Roland's Journey's never going to.
Right.
We're never going to find out. Fortunately, he's okay, and he did, and he's still churning stuff out today, which is good for you guys because that gets you new material all the time.
Yeah.
Any idea when there will be the next release? I know you've talked about several things that are in the works.
No, we don't have an idea. Budgetary concerns, obviously. We want to step it up next time. We want to have even better production level, and really get kind of lock in what we want to sound like. And that goes as far as sound production, just the distortion on the guitars and the level of the bass and all those sorts of things, just the technical side of sound recording. But there's a guy in Nashville that I've been talking to. He came to one of our shows and reached out to us. He said, I loved hearing your set. The Stephen King thing is so cool, and your sound is so nostalgic for me because, this is a sound that is based around everything from the Ramones up through that 90s pop punk thing. And so he's like, if you guys ever want to record again, let me know and we can work together. And so I've been talking to him, and he's got a kind of a neat setup where he's doing analog and digital. Don't ask me how it works. I'm not a gearhead, but he's kind of still using the reel-to-reel kind of technology in conjunction with digital. So I thought that kind of struck a chord with me as well, because I kind of like that sort of thing, be more of a traditionalist, and and I think there's some sound quality that gets lost when it's strictly digital. I mean, that's what everything is now for the most part anyway. So I think all of us are kind of used to it. But on the flip side, I talked to him, and he was really easy to talk to, sounded like he would be really laid back to work with. And I feel like that would be a cool option for us. But yeah, no, we definitely want to get some stuff out. If nothing else, just like maybe like a short little 4-song something to put out there as new material, and try to stay fairly regular with putting at least something out,
Is the Bandcamp page the best way for people to keep up with you guys?
Yeah, you can do the Bandcamp. We would love it if you came and visited that site. It's just the Stevens or the Stevens Band, one of those two, band.bandcamp.com.
Yeah, we're also on Spotify, and to people in the area or looking to come to our shows, we're always putting future dates and things like that on our Instagram. I wouldn't say we're the most active on Instagram, but we do always try to let people know when we're going to be playing next, where they can find us at, and things like that. So between Bandcamp, Spotify, and Instagram.
And I always like to mention when I'm talking to an artist that's on Bandcamp, to mention that Bandcamp does a thing on the first Friday of the month where they waive their fees so the artists get all the money. So the next one is coming up on Friday, November 4th. So if you hang in there for a couple more weeks and then go to the Stevens page and buy their album, that money will go to them, and hopefully they'll be able to use that to get the next album going.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We would love that.
And we appreciate you saying that.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Because like I said, we don't have any intentions of stopping if the fates will allow that, because we're loving it. We're having a blast. Like I said, we're meeting all kinds of cool people. A band, Second Self, have been awesome friends to us. We share rehearsal space with them. You mentioned Mike Patton from Vista Blue. He has been amazing with awesome. Mentioning us as much as possible. And, Slump Test, those guys have been rad. They're out of Nashville as well, and a bunch of others. But yeah, Smithson's and Smithson's, that's fun. That was my son's band teacher, and a couple of his buddies said they would open for us one time, and I said, all right. I finally relented, and they're like, well, we've never practiced. I'm like, too bad. You already said you want to do it, so you better come up with something. Yeah,
it was actually our first show. It was our first ever show. We played at the Springwater in downtown Nashville, and they were the opening band, I believe, right? Yeah, and they're just awesome, funny guys. Mm-hmm. Great songwriters. I mean, just will make you laugh through the whole song, and on and off the stage. Great guys, and they're actually working on putting some stuff out too. And they're not far from us as far as where they're based out of too. So,
I had noticed on your Bandcamp page, just because it's different than most, because most are beating people over the head with their merch, shirts and key fobs and everything else. And I didn't see that on your page. Is that something to come, or is it intentionally not something you're getting into? Or is it the legal part of it?
It's the lazy part of it for me.
Okay, fair enough.
We have shirts and stickers and buttons and
hats.
Well, we just ran out of hats, but we've had, ball caps, and Chayce had a cool idea. He had some guitar picks made up. So we got, just some basic merch that needs to be replenished, now that I think about it.
And Seth still hasn't taken up my idea of we should have Stephen King bookmarks.
Yes.
Yeah.
Not Stephen King, the Stevens
bookmarks. Yeah.
Yeah.
They'll fly off the shelf. Can't you imagine?
But anyway, that's something that
probably in the future.
That now that you mention it, yeah, absolutely. But we're also nice guys, and we don't want to beat anybody over the head. So we've tried to. Our T-shirts, for instance, were DIY. The wife and I bought a screen printing machine and figured it out. So those were truly done from the punk ethic. The other stuff we ordered, I think the hats were made at a friend's house.
Yeah.
Well, I always try and encourage people who are listening that the best way to support artists is to buy their stuff, whether it's a hat or it's a digital version of their album, or buy some CDs at the show or whatever. If you like somebody, support them so that they know and they can keep doing what they're doing. So hopefully people will hear this and they'll cruise by your Bandcamp page or they'll find you on Spotify.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And actually to come, we are going to have some cassettes available, some CDs available. Those are very much in the works, and hopefully before the end of the year gonna be available, either I think through the people pressing them and at shows as well. So
yeah, actually there's an update. I don't think I've told the guys, but yeah, the cassettes is going to be a little further out, but I do want to at least get a CD. I know that version of physical media is not as popular. It's like all the vintage, stuff is in vogue right now. Like, I feel ashamed because I haven't kept up with merch, but yeah, we definitely would love to sell you merch. And if you just want to go to our Instagram and you say, hey, I would love a t-shirt, or I would love a hat, or I will get one to you. Absolutely. Yeah. And we'll work something out. So
check out the Stevens. It's STEPHENS. It's just like Stephen King, but with an S on the end of Stevens. .bandcamp.com. You can check out the songs there. You can buy them, and you can connect with the band so that you can get a hat or whatever else you want, and bookmark it so you can come back and see what's new as soon as they post the next.
Absolutely.
All right, guys. Thanks so much for taking some time out and helping us celebrate the Halloween season with your Stephen King songs.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken.
Us.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having us and putting up with us.
Yeah.
And thank you so much for listening and for continuing to support the Sounds of Christmas station and podcast. Station is still on, of course, and since we recorded this in October, it's actually the Sounds of Halloween, playing lots of spooky songs for the current season, like a lot of the stuff that we talked about on this episode with the Stevens. If you'd like to check it out, just head on over to thesoundsofchristmas.com and click on the tree or the player on the front page or on the Listen Now page. You can also grab our app in the Google Play Store and take the music with you wherever you go. And as far as the podcast goes, we're now on over 30 podcasting sites. So if you didn't find us on your favorite today, just search for the Sounds of Christmas wherever you listen and download podcasts, and I'm pretty sure you'll see our tree. Then you can subscribe and you'll never miss another episode. If you have comments or suggestions on this episode, previous episodes, the Sounds of Christmas station, the Sounds of Halloween, or the Standard station, feel free to reach out to me on social media or through the website. Thanks again. And may you always believe in Santa Claus.